Good morning, students. Welcome to this virtual class. I hope you must go through your books and you have cleared about the meaning of budget, central budget, state budget, and as per our different articles 112 of that our constitutions, that state budgets, and so far we have already discussed that government budget consists mainly two components. One is budget receipt and another is the budget expenditure. I was discussing that is that government budget, which is divided into two parts. One is receipts, another is that expenditures, or it is budget receipt or budget expenditure. Two types we are discussing. One is budget receipt, another is the budget expenditures. So these budget receipts, which I was discussing in the last period, one is revenue receipts, another is capital receipts. Revenue receipts and capital receipts. I have discussed what is revenue receipts. Revenue receipts are those receipts that neither create the liability nor that reduction in assets. Revenue receipts, that receipts neither creates any liability nor reduction in assets. Again I am repeating, neither creates liability nor reduction in assets, in any assets. This is called that revenue receipts. Don't forget why I am repeating again. Don't be confused, because when I will go in advanced, at that time you should not confuse. So revenue receipt are neither receipts, neither create the liability nor reduction in asset. Revenue receipt are those receipts neither create the liability nor reduction in assets. Or we can say that the revenue receipts that does not either create a liability or lead to reduction in assets. दोनों सेंटेंस सही है. Does not either create a liability or reduction in assets. Does not either create a liability or reduction in assets. It means same thing. Neither create the liability nor reduction in assets. So again I repeat, revenue receipts are those receipts neither creates the liability nor reduction in assets. So this revenue receipt, we have given that examples, that is that most revenue receipt is that tax. So that is why I was told to all of you, one is that tax revenue, another is that non-tax revenue. So that revenue receipt is divided into two parts. One is revenue receipt from tax, or that is the tax revenue. This is divided into two parts. One is tax revenue, another is that non-tax revenue. Or tax revenue, that is divided into two parts. I have already said, one is direct tax, another is that indirect tax. So direct tax example I have already said, that is that income tax, or we may say that corporation tax. But indirect tax we have already said that sales tax or excise duties. These are the different kinds of indirect tax. Similarly, that non-tax revenue I have already said, that is that one is that commercial revenue, one is that commercial revenue. It is already finished. What is commercial revenue? It's revenue received by the government by selling its goods and services produced by the government agencies. That example I was told to all of you, that is the most important, payment of postage, interest on funds borrowed from the governments. These are the different types of commercial revenue. That you may example given that postage stamp. Best example, postage stamp, commercial revenue. And second part I was discussing also at that time, administrative revenue. Administrative revenue. What is administrative revenue? I have already said, it is that revenue that arises from the administration function of the governments. I was given that so many examples. Among all them, first example I was given that fee. I was given the example fee. Fee means a payment to defray the cost of each recurring services, like different kinds of registration fee. Whenever you are purchasing that land, at that time you are giving that some fee, that is called that registration fee. Similarly, there are some second administration body point of view, fines and penalties. Fines and penalties. Fines matlab it is clear. I was telling at that time, suppose when you are violating the rules, traffic rules, that is without helmet you are going. So at that time, whenever you will be cut in red hand, so at that time you are paying that fines without helmets. Or different kinds of penalties, like penalty imposed also, infringement of laws. At that time I was saying infringement of laws, जब law को आप तोड़ देते हैं इस समय जो आपको लगता है वो penalty. Similarly, third one I have already told, for features. For features, third points, FOREIFEITURES, for features. It means if you are non-compliance of that any court order, non-compliance of the court order, you may write here non-compliance of court order, at that time what is to be charged by the court as per the government. So that is to be called that forfeitures. And fourth one I was telling to all of you, that is that escheat. You have already known that what do you mean by escheat. Escheat means that is a claim of the government on the property of a person which dies without having any legal heirs or without any leaving that will. Then that property which is to be called that charges, that is called that claim, which is collected by the government, is to be called that escheat. Clear? So escheat means a claim of the government on the property of a person who dies without having any legal heir or any without having that will. Then that is to be called that escheat. These are the different kinds of administrative revenue. Four kinds of administrative revenue: fees, fines, fees, fines and penalties, forfeitures, escheat. It means it is that one kinds of revenue of the governments. For that collection of the revenue, government does not create that any liability or nor in that reduction in assets, or that is why neither creates the liability nor reduction in assets. This is to be called that revenue receipts. Now we'll switch over to capital receipt. Revenue receipt is finished. Now we'll go to the capital receipt. What do you mean by capital receipts? I think you must clear. I repeated or revised this again. So now switch over to the capital receipt. After finishing the revenue receipt, we will go to the capital receipt. What do you mean by capital? We have already known in macroeconomics. It is that part of the money which helps to increase that more and more capital stock. So in our budget, because we are discussing that government budget, and government budget, one is receipt, another is that expenditure. So that budget receipt is divided into that revenue receipt and capital receipt. That is, for capital budget covers the creation of disposal of assets, liability, or capital receipts are receipts under the capital accounts. Capital receipts are the receipts under the capital accounts. So these receipts either create a liability or in reduction assets. This is that either create a liability or reduction in assets. Remember it. Revenue receipts neither create liability nor reduction in assets. ध्यान से रखिए. Capital receipt are those receipts that either creates liability or reduction in assets. Please see it. Revenue receipts neither create liability nor reduction in any assets. Whereas capital receipts are the receipts either creates the liability or reduce the assets. These receipts are also called either creates a liability or leads to reduction in assets. Can you give the example now? You have already known, we have already discussed. That is that most important example of the capital receipt is that disinvestment. Disinvestment. What do you mean by disinvestment? Not investment. Disinvestments. It means this is in case of the government. When that public sector or the government sells his some part of that shares or equities to that any person or the privates, then that is to be the income which is earned by the government is to be called that disinvestments. For example, NALCO, National Aluminium Company, BALCO, these are the different kinds of public sector units. So whenever that public sector enterprises which are owned by that government, already from business studies you have already known private sector and public sectors. So investment means selling a part or a whole of the shares or the equity of the public sector enterprises by the government, or it is defined as the withdrawal that some equity shares from that any public enterprises. It is called that capital receipts because it reduces the assets of the governments. When government sells these securities, when government sells these equities, when government sells these shares, at that time that will be that reduction in assets. Or we may say that is the loan. Whenever the government or that central governments, different kinds of loans raised by the government from the public or that RBI, Reserve Bank of India, or other parties through sale of his treasury bills, that is also one kind of capital receipts. So what is that capital receipts? Capital receipts either creates a liability or leads to reduction in assets. Capital receipts are those types of receipts either create the liability or to reduction in assets. So most important example is that disinvestments or loans from the RBI, from the public. At that time, the government has the liability to pay or to repay the loans. That time it is called that capital receipts. We receive the money, but the government has liability to pay the loans. So that is why it is to be called that capital receipts. Again I repeat, capital receipts are those receipts which are created liability or reduction in assets. So most important example is the disinvestments or loans from the public or the Reserve Bank of India or any other kinds of selling of the treasury bills, as well as loans from the foreign governments. Loans from foreign governments. FOREIGN, foreign governments. That is also, or we may say that loans from the international institutions. Loans from international institutions. International institution. Can you say that one of the name of international institutions like World Bank or Asian Development Bank, IBRD, Indian Bank for Reconstruction of Developments, etc. When that government take loan from this international institution, that is also to be capital receipts, because whenever government takes loan, he has to repay it. Either creates a liability, it means government has the liability to repay it. Similarly, recoveries of loans, such recoveries causes the reduction in government assets. It means if government takes the loan, to repayment the loan, when government pays this loan, at that time that assets is to be reduced. That is the reduction in assets. So that is to be called that one kind of example also I was given, that is that disinvestments. So disinvestment proceeds the revenue through the sale of the shares and the public sector undertakings, and small services, that is small saving and deposits in the public provident funds. Deposit in the public provident fund, that is also one kind of reduction in assets. That is also to be called the capital receipt. So these are the different kinds of capital receipts. One is revenue receipts, another is the capital receipts. So revenue receipts are those receipts neither create the liability nor reduction in assets. Capital receipts are those receipts either created liability or reduction in assets. Revenue receipts, one is tax revenue, another is that non-tax revenue. Again, non-tax revenue can be that commercial revenue and that administrative revenue. Administrative revenue may be that four parts: fees, fines and penalties, and escheat, and that forfeitures. These are the difference also between the revenue receipts and the capital receipts. Please note it. You will make it clear in your left side and right side. Distinguish between revenue receipts and the capital receipts with giving that examples. Don't forget to give that examples. So I will not take that more time today, because already that very short durations, but you must be clear very well, because most important for this chapter, and this is that revenue receipt and that capital receipts, as well as you will get that 6 mark question from this unit. So number of pages are less, but that understanding it will take more time. So that tomorrow we will start that next one, that is that budget expenditures. Next topic I will start that budget expenditure. Today I will not take. Thanks to all of you.